It's kind of wild that the biggest question about the Galaxy S26 Ultra right now isn't whether it'll be great, but whether it'll stay great enough when Sony just dropped a brand new 200 megapixel camera sensor that could completely shift the flagship camera race. Before we jump in, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. It really helps me keep bringing you more tech breakdowns like this one. And that's the real twist. Samsung's next Ultra might be playing it safe at the exact moment Sony is throwing something genuinely disruptive into the mix. So why does that matter? Because we're at a point where phones aren't just phones anymore. They're replacing compact cameras, point-and-shoots, even travel cameras. Every generation pushes the boundary a little further, and whichever brand nails low light, dynamic range, and zoom performance basically defines what phone photography looks like for the next year. Normally, Samsung rides confidently at the top. But with the S26 Ultra only weeks away, Sony has shown up with something that might overshadow it before it even launches. Let's start with the one big upgrade Samsung is expected to make: the jump from an f1.7 aperture to f1.4 on the main camera. That doesn't sound dramatic at first glance, but in camera terms, it's actually a pretty meaningful leap. Going from f1.7 to f1.4 gives the sensor about 50% more light. Not double, but definitely not nothing. More light equals cleaner low-light shots, lower ISO, less noise, and faster shutter speeds, all on the same ISOCELL HP2 sensor Samsung has been using. This matters even more because that sensor uses tiny 0.6 micron pixels. The smaller the pixel, the more it struggles in dim conditions, unless you give it more light to work with. So this wider aperture could be doing a lot of heavy lifting behind the scenes. There's also the depth of field effect. With f1.4, you get a naturally blurrier background, which makes portraits look better and gives that nice separation between subject and background. Sure, AI-generated bokeh has gotten pretty good, but the real thing still hits differently. But that's kind of the point. These are nice improvements, not groundbreaking ones, especially when everything else in the rumored camera setup feels familiar. 50 megapixel ultra-wide, 50 megapixel 5x periscope, a slightly bumped 12 megapixel selfie, and a modest upgrade from 10 to 12 megapixels for the 3x telephoto. Functional, but hardly a wow. And then Sony walks in with the LYT901. This sensor is Sony's first 200 megapixel flagship camera chip, and on paper, it looks like the kind of thing that makes other brands sweat. It's a stacked 1.12-inch sensor, not quite 1 inch, but still larger than what most phones use today, with 0.7 micron pixels and Sony's quad-quad Bayer system. That means it can group 16 pixels together for better low-light performance, then use AI to reconstruct detail when you zoom in. Sony says it can shoot 200 MP RAW at 10 frames per second and 50 MP at 30 frames per second. And they're promising up to 4 times high-quality crop zoom, basically saying we can zoom without even using a telephoto lens. And that's what makes the timing so interesting. The S26 Ultra is launching first, likely at the end of January, while the first phones using Sony's new sensor, like the Oppo Find X9 Ultra and Vivo 300 Ultra, won't arrive until spring. Samsung gets the early spotlight, but Sony might steal the spotlight later. Imagine this. Samsung launches the S26 Ultra with mostly familiar hardware and one meaningful but subtle update. Then, 2 or 3 months later, Oppo and Vivo show up with a brand new sensor capable of extreme detail, stronger low-light performance, and zoom tricks that rely more on computational power than optics. Even if Samsung sells way more units, enthusiasts and reviewers are going to pay attention to whichever device delivers the best real-world photos. And that's where things get interesting. Because for all the hype around specs, the S25 Ultra, and most likely the S26 Ultra 2, is already an incredibly capable camera. If you look at what the S25 Ultra has done in markets like Japan, where camera culture is taken seriously, it's clear that Samsung isn't falling behind in any catastrophic way. The S25 Ultra already helped push the compact camera category further toward irrelevance, and the S26 Ultra will likely continue that trend. So the real story isn't Samsung versus Sony, It's about whether incremental improvements are enough when the competition is starting to take bigger swings. A wider aperture is measurable, it's practical, it's genuinely useful. But a brand new sensor with new architecture, new processing pipelines, and new computational tricks, that's the kind of thing that gets camera nerds watching closely. And maybe that's the best part of this whole moment. We're heading into 2026 with actual competition again, not just megapixel races, but real experiments in sensor design, optics, and AI processing. If Sony's LYT-901 lives up to the hype, it might force brands like Samsung to rethink their camera strategy. And if Samsung proves that smart tuning and smart choices can beat raw hardware, that's equally interesting. Either way, the winners are the people who just want to take incredible photos from their pocket, no matter which logo is on the back. What's your thoughts on this? Let me know in the comments section. See you in the next video. Take care.